Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, as the Tiger Cats down the Toronto Argonauts for the second time this season. It's 31-28, the final in the Labor Day Classic, as Dwayne Gretzky holds a concert on the field behind me. I don't know if that will cut in or not, but we've got all of the reaction. We'll go through the stats, the things that went wrong for the Toronto Argonauts this afternoon on Labor Day, and a game that on paper they should win, and yet for the second time, this one looked like a kind of like a carbon copy of the first one in some ways. And we'll break it all down for you. My name's Ben Grant. His name's JB. Before we get into the details of this one, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing. You've got to try Longboat Pale Ale if you haven't tried it yet. It is the beer that was made for you, for fans of the Double Blue. Next time you're at BMO Field, and the next home game at BMO Field is going to be against these same Hamilton Tiger Cats, with Toronto having to settle a score, make sure you stop by Something in the Water Brewing. We're going to be doing something big that day to celebrate revenge against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So make sure you make your way down to Something in the Water Brewing in Liberty Village, try some Longboat Pale Ale, and then continue on to the Argos game, which is just steps from Something in the Water Brewing at BMO Field. JB, you can't be down 21-3 in the first quarter of a football game and then be upset at the end that you lost it. This is the second straight time against the Ticats. The Argos have come out, I don't know if flat is the right word, but they came out wrong and they end up in a big hole.
Yeah, I mean, our hope, or at least certainly my strategic hope, was that they would win the first quarter and really get that crowd turned against Hamilton. And the opposite happened, that they actually were dominated in the first quarter and the crowd got really into it. Yeah, I mean, they didn't come out flat, but they certainly didn't look like they came out with a Hamilton-specific game plan. The way that Hamilton looked like it had a few ideas about what it could do to Toronto, and it jumped on them immediately, and it didn't feel that way on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think just going back to what you were saying to kick this off too, the idea, you actually alluded to this in our pregame walkthrough podcast, wanting to take Hamilton out of the game early and get the crowd turning against the Tiger Cats. The opposite, of course, happened, but I want to give credit to the Hamilton Tiger Cats coaching staff. They won the coin toss, they deferred, but then decided to take the wind in the first quarter, which is very unusual. You would almost always take the wind in the second and fourth, if that's your choice. They didn't, because they wanted to get off to a hot start. They didn't want Toronto getting up early in that first quarter, and Toronto had the wind in the ball, which is what typically happens to the team or the other team when one team defers. And so instead they took the wind and they used it to their full advantage, because the wind, while it may not have looked like much on TV, and even watching here, the flags blowing around, it didn't look very windy. It was very windy. In pregame warmup, I was watching kickers struggle mightily kicking towards the scoreboard side, and in the end, the wind side ended up winning, I think, 46-13 or something like that. So it was much easier to score with the wind than it was into the wind. And so them making that decision, that went towards them being able to build a 21-3 lead, but it was more than just coin flips and taking the win. There were mistakes made. Let's go to the very first mistake. And I don't know if I put this on Chad Kelly or not, because I really thought sincerely that this was a pass interference call that was missed. And Coach Dimwitty thought that as well. Tavares Daniels runs, I think it was an out route, and appeared to get shoved in the back by Leonard. It looked to me like it was both hands on the numbers. Tavares fell down. Leonard came away with the interception. Before the play was even over, Coach Dimwitty had thrown his challenge flag on the field because the play happened right in front of him. He was 100% certain that was going to be overturned and that would be pass interference. It goes to the command center. They let it stand. What did you think of that, having had the advantage of several replays watching this game on television?
Yeah, I mean, and surprisingly, because usually they're pretty neutral, the TSN guys also initially thought that it was going to be pass interference. When you watch the replays, he doesn't straighten his arms, so it's not is not drastic. However, having said that, it is clearly pass interference. I mean, it is block in the back on top of pass interference. I mean, there is a rule specifically for not being able to put your hand on somebody's numbers. It was blocking back. Was it the most violent and egregious pass interference ever? No. Um, I know that the command center or the new command center is probably only looking for absolutely egregious calls to overturn. But it was pass interference. There's nobody in the league office who could stand and explain that putting your hands on the number and pushing a receiver gently doesn't count as pass interference. Which is one of the frustrating aspects is that there's never anybody held to account for this decision. I mean, if they should stand by their decisions, there should be somebody explaining the decision that they have made. And, clearly they felt it was pass interference, but not enough to overturn it, which is really disappointing. I mean, I was a little less angry after watching a couple of replays, but nevertheless, I mean, it was pass interference by every definition of the rule. The Argos do not have a great track record going with the command center challenges.
It's terrible, actually. But here we are again. And what I hate about this is here we are again, starting off the show talking about the command center. And this is the last thing that we want to be talking about, because you should never mention the command center. In a football game, it shouldn't come up. It shouldn't be a topic. And I think, you look at the other two challenges, the other two calls that were made, I think they were both correct. Chad Kelly, they reviewed the Chad Kelly 2-point conversion. It was initially ruled that he got into the end zone. They reviewed that, and I think they correctly decided he didn't. He did not get into the end zone. They also, Scott Milanovic threw a flag saying that there was a no yards that was missed, and that was reviewed, and it was overturned. The no yards was, those were correct. Like, both of those calls were correct. But in the end of the day, there are 3 calls made, or 3 reviews done. 2 of them were correct. One of them, I think, was incorrect, and all 3 end up going against the Argos. And here we are again, leading off another post-game reaction broadcast. We're talking about the command center, and we don't want to talk about officials. We don't want to talk about command center. We want to talk about the game. And yet that was such a massive play, because one play later, so the pick stands, and a play later, Hamilton's connecting on a bomb to Tim White over top of Royce Metier, and everything was, Hamilton was off to the races, 7-0, a couple minutes into the game, and this place was going wild, and it could have been the other way.
I mean, it isn't the reason they lost. However,
no, it's not. It's not.
But what's really frustrating about it is it takes away your ability to challenge.
And they lost a timeout as well.
And so it's an incredibly punitive, result for, not only do you get kind of, given the short shrift on the call for whatever reason, there's all these additional bonus prizes of terribleness that come with it. And, it's like this trilogy of terrible things that happen when your challenge is is not held up. So it's a big gut punch to use it early and to have it go against you. And then, speaking about, are the Argos, were they ready for a fist fight? To not be ready for a dagger on a change of possession. I mean, you've got to be ready for a dagger there.
Yeah, it's called, we refer to it in the coaching community as sudden change. It's something that you're always aware of. Anytime the defense has to suddenly haul themselves out there on the field, they weren't expecting to need to, usually, it's after a turnover, and you were looking for the big play, because statistically defenses let up big plays in those situations, because they get out there, they weren't ready to be out there, they're not maybe as mentally focused, and little mistakes happen. And so you're taught about this in every college program, every college system. They talk about sudden change and the importance of it, and how you have to expect a big play. And there, it didn't look like Toronto was ready for a big play. It looked like it looked like a good play call, that they ended up with a post splitting the 2 high defenders right down the middle, and that was a nice ball from Bo Levi Mitchell, who I thought played an outstanding game today. He looked on point today from pretty much start to finish.
Yeah, that was a tough. They did have a lot of great replays on that. Looked like maybe the safety bit on the underneath route, and then was not deep for the skinny post.
And then a few minutes later, it looked like a bust. It was a pretty tough play call. It looked like it was Deshaun Amos that was sort of victimized on that. Tim White again, this time I think for 70, was this one for 70 yards? I think it was a 70-yard touchdown. And again, it wasn't quite sudden change, but it followed a no yards penalty against Toronto where it looked like Hamilton would be backed up. Instead, they moved the ball 15 yards forward. And it looked like an out and up that Tim White had, just a quick sort of step to the sideline and then taking off up the rails out of the slot position. And I think Deshaun Amos, to me, it looked like he was passing it off to Tavares when he saw White break to the outside, and he started to now look inside to help. And instead, White turned it upfield, and that was his deep responsibility. That's the way I read it up here, but I'm not sure.
It's hard to say because I mean, I was looking at that and thinking, well, who had deep there? Because like the corner clearly did not have deep.
Well, at least like, it looked like he did.
Well, that's what I mean. It looked like that. It looked like he was handing over a deep route to the corner, and the corner did not know that they were in deep coverage there. I mean, it looked like that because if the halfback had deep, obviously he can't hand it off to anybody. So I just took that to be like a cover 3 blown, that he thought the corner had deep, and nobody had deep.
Yeah, it could be. I didn't see a good enough. Like the replays I saw were all zoom shots.
I mean, maybe they thought it was cover 2, cover 2. But even if it was cover 2, you wouldn't hand that off in cover 2.
Well, I think if it's shallow enough, I don't know the depth because none of the replays I saw were zoomed out. It was all in tight, and so I couldn't tell.
They weren't great replays. Sometimes on the TV broadcast you get better replays and they kind of walk you through it. And I know it was out and up, but I don't think the out and up was the reason it was a bust. I think it looked like he was handing off the out. So I don't know. I don't know who you would hand off an out to.
Well, I think he's handing it off to, like, he's assuming, because I guess if there's no flat threatened, then you do have deep. If you've got a deep route coming from the inside, you're going to hand that off to the corner, who presumably can back out. But I never got a replay to see if there was anyone short that would keep the corner pinned to the line of scrimmage. So
yeah, I think there was certainly the corner was short.
Yeah, the corner was short. The corner was short for sure.
So he wasn't there on coverage. I assume somebody was there. Anyway, that was a bust. And they clearly saw that on film. They clearly saw that there were issues in. Look, that's a tough. That's a zone beater. I mean, that is designed, is playing with rules and depth, and that's right on that cusp of like whose responsibility is it, and then it turns into a wheel. Like that is a damn hard thing to run if you're not running a ton of zone all the time, and clearly Hamilton. Felt that if they could catch Toronto in a zone, that the deep overs or the outs or out and ups were a problem. They just weren't great at handing them off.
And the only touchdown we haven't talked about in the first quarter was the Tagovailoa touchdown, which I don't think that was necessarily the problem. It was a long drive that Hamilton put together. I thought Bo Levi Mitchell ran a really nice drive. They got the run game involved too. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. But I think there needed to be a little better awareness because Tagovailoa came out a couple times in this game, and when you see him on the field, this is going to be a run. This is at most it's a short pass. At most
it's like a wildcat. Pass. It's like you have to identify it as a wildcat immediately. Like they didn't bring him in to hand it off.
Right. They're not bringing him in to throw it deep either. And so you should press everybody up. And they look like they were caught off guard. Now, again, that's first and goal from the 3. You're not probably going to stop a lot of those unless you're Saskatchewan last week. But in this situation, I thought they needed to respond better. And then late in the game when Tagovailoa came in again, it looked like they were surprised when he kept the ball and ran for a first down. So that just needed to be a bit better in terms of the recognition. But that was more a long drive that you credit to Bo Levi Mitchell.
And full credit to Hamilton, at the end of the game, second time every time, Toronto was ready for it. Full credit to Hamilton for pulling that out. That was nowhere in the playbook. It was nowhere on the film. It's easy for us to say, looking back, oh, they should have done this. But when the game is flying and a guy goes in, like if you haven't repped, if Tua comes in, we're going to set this edge. We're going to assume it's going to be a handoff and so forth. Like they caught Toronto by surprise, with something they hadn't put on film before. This was a bit of their, kitchen sink game, and they came out and played like it. And full credit to Hamilton for having something that the Toronto defense, had not prepared for.
Yeah, no, you give. That's the thing. Like Hamilton deserves the win. They absolutely deserve this win. They had their own problems, but they did everything they could to put themselves in the best position possible, which was getting out to a big lead.
Eastern MVP Bo Levi, came to play.
He was great. Like he had an excellent game.
He's the best quarterback in the East.
Well, yeah, you can't. It's really hard to argue with that. Like I think Fajardo would get the nod over Bo Levi Mitchell just because of the record. You look at he's the quarterback of the team that just doesn't lose, even though a couple of those wins weren't him. It's still where it would end up going. But I think Bo has played a great. More than first half of the season. Now they're through 12 games now. It's like 2/3 of the season. His stats are certainly there, but this was one of the best games that he has played. He looked great. Hamilton didn't turn the ball over, and that was something that they have done every single game. They've turned the ball over. They've had trouble hanging on to the football. And today, Bo Levi Mitchell ended up 20 of 30 for 347, 2 touchdowns. Most of that was in the first half, and then they kind of took the foot off the gas a bit in the second.
It reminds me a little bit of the Rex Ryan Jets, who used to have sort of a clinical obsession with beating the Patriots, and regardless of what their season was going, they always gave the Patriots an incredibly difficult time, but just were never able to muster up that level of concentration and execution against the other teams and the other 14 games. So it was like they just put everything into this game. Hamilton literally just is like, well, we're only going to win 2 games this year, and these are going to be the 2. And I guess they took that to heart.
Yeah, no, they did. They came ready to play, and they were fired up. They played a great game.
Peters again. I mean, he looked like some combination of. I mean, I don't even know who you can compare him to. He was Godzilla out there.
I know, and Hendricks again was in the backfield causing all sorts of issues. Both those guys had their best and second best game of the season against the Argonauts. If Hamilton could figure out a way to get them to play like that every single week, this season might be going a little bit differently for them. But he'd
be your defensive MVP. I mean, he was shot out of a cannon. Like there were like 15 plays he made that honestly were NFL tape plays. Like if I were looking at it, I would be like, this guy's going to the NFL.
And yeah, he was briefly in the NFL with the Falcons.
I know,
but you see those highlights and you're like, yeah, well, he belongs there. What was the hit on Chad Kelly? I don't even know how he got there. I was watching the other side of the field. Chad Kelly ran up the middle and then got blasted by Jamal Peters. I'm like, what is he doing here?
I've never seen a quarterback get blasted by the corner.
Yeah,
on a middle run.
I know it was everything. Peters was
on the boundary corner.
I know, but my criticism of the Argos on that, and with regards to Jamal Peters, is they didn't really test him deep. Like he had a bad hamstring. He didn't practice this week, early in the week because of a hamstring issue, and so you want to try and see if you can exploit that. You want to do the stuff that Peters doesn't do as well. He's great at playing up. He's a hard hitter. He's a big physical guy, uses his length very well. But you want to test him deep. You want to test him on double moves and things that are really going to cause him to push that hamstring. And I thought for sure there was a play they ran in the first quarter where Coxie was on his own to the left, and they had 4 receivers lined up to Chad Kelly's right, and you had Peters and Coxie one-on-one. And I thought, well, for sure they're going to come back to that. Coxie and Peters one-on-one, and they're going to do a double move, or they're going to do something that involves a 50-50 ball downfield, and they never went to it. They didn't even go back to that same formation once the entire rest of the game. And this was a first quarter play. They had 3 more quarters to do that, and I was waiting for that to happen. It never happened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in generally, like I think we both are in a decent mood about the game because I think this is a game where the absence of Wynton McManus was stark.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen. I mean, you're going to have games where not having your defensive MVP is going to cost you the game. And, Hamilton's ability to run middle was clearly, a result of not having McManus in the game. Um, so I thought Kelly looked better than he did in the Saskatchewan game.
Yep.
But there's still stuff to work on. Like his at the end, they were able to get pressure pretty quickly, and he's
Before we
got to be able to get rid of
transition,
that ball faster.
before we go to Chad Kelly, let's just finish talking about the Toronto defense. Just one more thing I want to say was
Yeah,
building off of your last point, the rushing game, because Toronto has been outstanding against the run all season long. They're allowing 70 something rushing yards a game, over 140 today. And that's the difference you're talking about. I know Wyndham McManus has been out for a few games now, but this was I think of all the games, it really did stand out where they didn't have an answer for that middle run. Like Greg Bell running the middle, 9 carries for 78 yards he had, and then he added another 40 through the air. Litre, when you knew it was going to be a run, like going back, Hamilton pinned on their own 1 yard line with Litre in the backfield as the only back, you knew where it was going. It's not going to be Bo Levi Mitchell running the ball out of his end zone. It's going to be Litre, and he ran for 9 yards. And then they gave it to him again a couple plays later, 9 yard gain. And then to Greg Bell, he runs for 10 yards. Those plays, we just haven't seen the Argos give those up this season. And so I think I'm being tough on the defense in this game. This was the only game really all year where I felt like the defense let the team down a little bit. And there are going to be games like that. The offense has done it a few times. Special teams has been invisible a couple times too. We've never really seen the Argos defense play a game like that. And I'm being very tough on them. They only let up 4 second half points. So it's not like they played terribly, but we're used to this defense being the reason the Argos won. That's how it's gone for a lot of this year. And today they looked pretty human and gave up a big day to Bo Levi Mitchell and anybody who ran the ball out of the Ticats backfield.
I mean, it definitely looked. I mean, Hamilton clearly knew some areas they wanted to attack. Being down at defensive line, we talked about being in the interior. The interior is not as good as it was. McManus not being there. Are at the linebacker are all those guys going 100%. They've now been going a bunch of games in a row, and that's gonna tire you out if you're not normally like a full-time inside linebacker. I mean, the inside was a little soft today, and they brought that power back in. And that hurt. I mean, I thought the pass rush was pretty good, and that they had a little more success with pass rush than they've had. And like you say, they did very well in that second half. I mean, the game was there for the offense to win. The offense wasn't great at nickel and diming its way down the field yet. That's the area they have to improve is being able to put together some drives that take 7, 8, 9 plays.
And let's transfer over to the offensive side of the ball. So Chad Kelly's performance. What do you think? He ends up 24 of 30, great percentage, 322 yards, great yardage, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. That interception was on that pass interference non-call that we both kind of felt Toronto got the short end of the stick on. And then he ran the ball 6 times for 39 yards and a touchdown. And the touchdown run was a pretty sensational run too. I thought he looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I think every game is going to be improving. He looked better than he did the last game. I thought that he looked calmer. He used his legs more, which is a terrific weapon. And, now they just have to look at this film and talk about, okay, you have to be careful on being impatient on the underneath throws. And, and there's a couple of different routes that they've got to find that he likes more, especially he's got to be able to get rid of that ball faster. Like at the end of the game, when that Hamilton rush is coming, even though Hamilton didn't bring a ton of guys, that they're saving their best moves for the end. So you have got to be able to get rid of the ball faster than he was able to on that final 2-minute drive.
There were two passes where I think he and Mackay Polk weren't on the same page. And if there's any receiver that you figure he's going to be a little slower to get up to speed with, it would be Polk, because he's played with all the other guys, Unger, Sindani, Daniels, Coxie. Those guys have all had a full season with Chad Kelly. They're aware of his tendencies. He's aware of theirs. Mackay Polk's a different story. Being a rookie this season, Chad hasn't had a chance to work with him. So both of those plays, one was in the first quarter on a play that I thought was going to be a touchdown. Mackay Polk leaked in behind the Hamilton secondary. Chad Kelly saw him and then threw it to the outside, and Mackay was looking to the inside, or vice versa. I actually can't remember which it was, but Mackay looked one way, Chad looked the other way. And as Mackay was jogging back to the huddle, Chad was sort of motioning like, I thought you were going to go this way. And that's a play that if they're on the same page, that's a touchdown. And then late in the game, actually it was right at the end of the third quarter, was a drive that ended up resulting in the field goal that began the fourth. Mackay Polk had another play that I think, had he been able to kind of read Chad's mind, would have been a touchdown. Chad was scrambling out to his left, and all there was out there was a corner. It was Mackay, a corner, and Chad. And Chad wanted Mackay to go deep because he wanted to force the corner to either go with Polk or come up and deliver the hit on Kelly. And so Kelly's running towards the line of scrimmage, but he's waiting. Mackay sat at the sideline instead, kind of waiting in space, but Chad couldn't throw that ball because the defender was in between them and closing, and then Chad had to cross the line of scrimmage and then was hit by the corner. I think he slid actually before connecting with the corner, but that's a play that a little bit more time together, Mackay knows now, I go deep. My scramble rules here with Chad are that he wants me to go deep, and if the corner goes with me, then I know Chad's going to run, and if he doesn't, I know I'm getting that ball for a touchdown. So those two plays, I think, could have changed this game, and that's just a familiarity thing that they'll iron out over time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would be more concerned if 3 weeks from now we saw this game. I think this was a very good progression, and I expect to see a continual improvement in terms of the coaches getting used to calling Chad. Like that's a thing in itself, in terms of getting into a rhythm with him about what he likes to throw, and them getting into a rhythm of what is in the toolbox and what's not, and what are their flaws. All of that is just going to be practice, and it's hard. Like it's hard having not had half a season, because like there's just only so much you can do at practice. There's so many things to work on. It's not like you can just have coach go out with Kelly for 3 hours and work on passing. It's just so hard to improve at practice. It's like you need the whole season of working at practice, and that is one of the aspects of having started halfway through. It's going to be, there's going to be some challenges, but I wondered. I was going to ask you, did you think they should have gone for any touchdowns instead of field goals in that first quarter?
I don't know. Like the one that I
Or
can
the
think
first
of,
half, I should say.
like the 3rd and 8. I know they ran out there like they were going to go for it and trying to draw Hamilton offside. I don't know. I didn't really feel that because I was so early. I didn't feel there was urgency necessarily. So yeah, I didn't really have a problem with that. I didn't like them chasing points. I didn't like them going for 2 when they did. I don't think you should ever go for 2 unless you think this is going to be your last touchdown, basically where you need it mathematically. And in the third quarter there, actually no, it was right before half, wasn't it? Where Toronto scored a touchdown and decided to go for 2 to try and make it a 7-point game going to half. They end up missing that. And then Hamilton drove down the field and kicked a field goal. So what could have been a 7-point game ended up being a 12-point game at half. And so I do think like going for 2 there, I don't like it. I know coaches like to make it an even number. They want, or a number divisible by 7 or whatever. They want to make it a 7-point advantage there going into the half. I get that. I just don't like it with so many ways to score individual points. I just felt they were chasing that point in the second half. And maybe that second half works out a little bit differently if you don't make that decision to go for 2. Now, if they get the 2-point conversion, it's a whole different story, but they didn't. And so we're left kind of second guessing it.
Yeah,
Uh, Sorry, go on.
I agree with you. I didn't like the 2 point at the time. I might have gone for. I mean, I don't hate the field goal, but I might have gone for one of those touchdowns in the second quarter. But that's I don't think I don't think it's wrong for what they did. That's just I think maybe going for touchdown there would be something. I know they're not great in the red zone, but I would have gone at 3rd and 8. Yeah, I would have been very tempted to go for it there.
Yeah, there were two other things that I questioned. I guess it was two last topics that we get into just before we sign off here. One was where I saw a little bit of rust from Chad Kelly was the quarterback draws. There were two where it looked like he chose a poor path. One, I think, would have resulted in a touchdown if he'd made a decision. He ended up running right into the back of, I think it was Ryan Hunter, might have been Peter Nicastro. And it was a perfect play call. It was a design quarterback draw, 3-man rush. Everybody else fanned out, and Kelly just ran straight into the back of his lineman. It looked like he couldn't decide, should I go right, should I go left? And I think Hendricks on the other side played it very honestly, and then Chad ran out of time and crashed into the back of his lineman. So that was the first one. The second one, it looked like he chose the wrong way. It was again, I don't know if it was a called quarterback draw this time or if it was just him deciding to run, but there was space to the left. He ran to the right and there was no space there. And I think I've seen Chad make better decisions on those. And I think that will come back to him as well as he gets more and more snaps and he gets that familiarity, because remember, he was not playing football for quite a long time, sitting out those first 9 games to start the season, right? So it's been a long time. Those things will come back, but that didn't look like Chad, who's normally really good on his feet in those situations. And then the other one was the snaps from Peter Nicastro from center. He's been really good at that all season. I know he's had some issues in years past, and it was after his rookie season, played mostly at guard. I thought we got into a stretch in the second half where it looked to me like one snap, it may have either hit his leg or went off his butt and bounced to Chad Kelly. And then it looked like there were a couple snaps that went high and wide. Did you have a better perspective on that watching on TV?
No, I mean, just exactly that. Like, I don't know. I mean, that again is they have not, he wasn't the center last year. So they haven't spent a lot of time together. So I think that's probably what that boils down to is they have to get together and get much more comfortable with. I mean, obviously the one on the ground, that's just a bad snap, but sometimes that comes from just not feeling like the mechanism is perfect.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I mean? Where like you just don't feel that 100%. Like I know exactly where his hands are going to be, and you know what I mean. You just get into that rhythm, and you kind of. I would imagine that that's a result of kind of overthinking a little bit in terms of that and that'll come. I think he's a pro, and that'll just be more time with him and Kelly.
Yeah, and these are things that I don't have long-term concerns about. I'm not worried about Chad Kelly long-term. I'm not worried about Peter Nicastro long-term.
I'm worried about that guy that McFadden hit.
Oh my God. Tuck on the man. But I thought initially he was going to go for the pick. Yeah. I saw McFadden come tearing in. It was such a long throw, that hitch route to your fullback. And McFadden came in from so far away. I get why Bo Levi Mitchell threw it, because the coverage was so off. It's such a big cushion. But by the time the ball got there, McFadden was at full speed. He's lucky he's a fullback and not like a 160-pound receiver or something like that. Because he'd still be lying down. Tuck got up pretty quickly. Oh my God,
he hit him.
It's so hard.
So hard.
I know, but I might have gone for the pick on that. But that's it's again, I can't fault Tavares on that. It was a great play. So yeah. Now, in terms of injuries going forward, the major one is Deshaun Amos. Like, before we talk about Amos a bit more, were there any others that you caught? It's so hard in this broadcast position. I know Mike Hogan talks about it a lot on our TSN broadcast. We're really high up and we're at the 9-yard line on the scoreboard side. And so most of the action was, because the wind was going away from us, most of the game took place about a mile downfield for us. And so it's hard to see the numbers. It's hard to see anything that's going on other than the X's and O's. Were there subs that I didn't notice, injuries I didn't notice? Because to me, it was Deshaun Amos.
Not that I noticed.
Okay.
Didn't seem to be anything significant. Other than the one. And did you think that was PI?
Deshaun Amos, you mean?
The
Or
push
with
off.
the one where he was complaining about. Yeah, we didn't talk about that. That I did think was PI. It was such a big play in the game too. The out route that Tim White was running, it looked like he bodied Deshaun Amos and then sort of chicken winged away from him. It's like I've taught receivers to do that because it's really hard for an official to see when you sort of chicken wing out of contact. That's what I thought it was, but we didn't get a replay of that. I was just looking at it live, and again from about a kilometer away. But I think that's what Amos was complaining about. And it did look like that's what's happened, but I'm not surprised that it wasn't flagged. It's really tough to see that. But that was why Tim White was wide open on an out route and Amos was so far away because of that contact. So he got in the official's face right after that. And I think that was why. And then
I agree that was it. But even on that the final catch where he was hurt,
I didn't see any offensive pass interference. It looked like hand checking. It looked like Amos was in good coverage. Yeah, I think he was right there. It was a perfect ball. I love the play call. It was so bold on 2nd down and 8 in that scenario. Game on the line, knowing that if it's incomplete, the clock stops and you're giving it back to Toronto with over a minute to go.
And to a rando.
Yeah, well, yeah, to Orange, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Rando's too strong, but I mean, not to your one.
No, that's it. No, and for him to step up there, it wasn't like it was a play to Tim White when you're going to O'Leary Orange instead. So that was a very brave play call and decision by Bo Levi Mitchell, but he nailed it. It was on the money. It was a beautiful ball. And that essentially ended the game. Although I don't know why Hamilton ran a play after they could have just taken a knee and they sent their rookie quarterback out there. But then, why isn't Toronto going for a strip? Like, why are you trying to sack him to get that ball out of there? But
they wanted to rip his head off, is what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a weird ending to the game. But the Deshaun Amos injury looked initially to me, I thought it was initially a shoulder the way he went down, but then it seemed like they had, I don't know if it was just a sleeve,
maybe collarbone, maybe, or
something like that.
Shoulder.
Collarbone, shoulder, forearm, something like that, but it looked pretty serious. The guys were waving for the trainer immediately when he went down, and the trainer
spent forearm.
They spent a lot of time over there with him. So it's one of those, shoulder, collarbone, forearm, something like that. Either way, we're hoping that it looked a lot worse than it was and that Deshaun Amos can come back, because he's been one of the best Argos defenders this season, and I think probably the best member of the Toronto secondary this season. He and Royce Metier both have played outstanding ball. But you wonder if he's away. The Argos just recently released a halfback in Mason Pierce. You wonder if he's going to be away from the team for some time, Deshaun Amos, you wonder if they might reach back out and see if they could get a hold of Mason Pierce, because he is a guy that could step right in immediately if need be. Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Again, Toronto losing 31-28 in the Labor Day Classic here in Hamilton. Next up for the Argos, it's a short week in a series of short weeks, 4 games in 18 days. It's just one of those CFL sort of schedule absurdities to start September, this being the first of 4. This Saturday, Toronto visits Ottawa, and they desperately need a win over the Red Blacks in their first matchup together this season. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the